would become like 1 and 2 bedroom condos. So we preserved the history, but now these were like affordable, nice little homeownership opportunities.
And the topic about anyone can welcome is related to the idea that it's not one person or another's responsibility in order to keep the community diverse and welcoming to everyone. We need everyone's voices out there, kind of being ambassadors, if you will, for this community. Bring more like-minded people, bring more people that want to continue to build and support and bring resources to the community.
Created, which is a set of words at the beginning and then a different announcement at the end. And as much as we tried to communicate what we did, it's
we would love to bring on someone who is kind of leading events on a recurring basis for the community. I was really inspired to hear about all the different ways that communities are activating, such as in Reservoir Hill. I heard about this 505 concept, so people pop open a bottle of wine at 5:05 p.m. once they've closed their laptop, and it's really evolved into a big community gathering.
And our discussion was around how we can honor communities, this history of communities, by making it available for people to stay there. That if we could get some zoning changes, we could take some of these large historic buildings and we could make them accessible to people who are seniors, people with disabilities, all people. We would also like to be able to change the income levels of people who are going into these communities and have all different types of income levels in a building. And
called CDN Real Discussions. These are going to be the main panels that are going to be leading into the piece of advocacy that CDN will champion on behalf of our membership. Now, we do have 4 amazing panel members that we...
My son became violent toward me because he didn't, when someone doesn't know how to express themselves, they sometimes go after the person they love. He didn't hurt me, but he could hurt me. He's a big guy. I had to hospitalize him. One of the things that but let me tell you about that. One of the ecosystems we don't have enough resources for people like my son who has autism in Maryland. Because I still had private insurance, I had to go to Pittsburgh to put him in the hospital, give him the right medication. But today, because of the ecosystem that I created, my son has housing in Hartford County. Like some people, like I know Baltimore City does, Baltimore County doesn't do the HUD 811 program. That's a non-hourly rent subsidy. We also have a rent subsidy through the Developmental Disability Administration. Some people, like in the disabilities field, like, why do you have a disability voucher just for those people? Because those people have a lot of issues and they have wraparound support. So that's one of the things that we're not really supporting or thinking about.
All right, John.
Not really 10 minutes.
No, that was like 3 minutes. You did good.
I think the new housing commissioner, Director Keene, kind of asked me this question standing right there last time I was in here, and I gave sort of a dumb answer. And I was thinking about it for a while, and I was like, that's not acceptable to say. He was basically like, I'm running the HCD now, like, what can we do better for the city? And I think this might sound stupid, but I really think it's about code enforcement in a lot of ways. And I know code enforcement gets talked about a lot. There's a theory, well, not a theory, there's like a framing for code enforcement from switching from code enforcement, which is kind of a punitive, sort of gross way to look at it, to what folks are calling strategic code compliance. So it's the idea that you are really being data-driven when you think about your housing typography, and you're using code enforcement in a way that is really community development focused, in my estimation. So you're going parcel by parcel, block by block, and treating those different parcels, from rental properties to homeowners to vacant buildings held by LLCs to vacant buildings held in heirs property by families. For me, each house, each building, I say house, each building should be seen for what it is in and of itself, and each should be treated differently in the way that code enforcement is done. And I think that would, and I think you can really leverage community to use that toward community development goals and not separate it as this sort of city function, but really go from kind of a weaponization from code enforcement to a much more strategic community development focus for code enforcement, but it means more money for them and, you know, the inspectors and all that stuff. So, yeah, I've just been thinking about that a lot. I think it's something that the city can do moving forward.
Beautiful. All right, Ms. Day, pop up, let us know.
I like what both of you all said. I just wanted to add, coming from the vision of a community leader. So my expertise is not in a specific area. I do a lot of listening to the residents in my community. And they get really frustrated with years of meeting and not seeing any change. And part of that comes from some departments, city agencies have to do some community engagement. So I kind of feel like they just kind of wear us down and still go ahead and do what they want to do anyway. And so what I'm on the mindset now, that I really feel that we need to hire our own consultant and maybe even get an attorney, because I think some of the things that's happened to us is illegal, but we're not real estate attorneys, so we don't really know. I think that one of the things that's most important, I said it in the last group that I was in, and I'm glad this young lady will be next. She's more articulate than I. I really do feel that communities know what they need. And if you're not talking to us to find out what we feel that we need, grocery stores, more affordable housing, better streets, better sidewalks, access to new businesses coming in, you're going to do what you think, some sort of prototype. I think communities are different all along. And the best way is to talk to the people that live in the community and find out what their desires are. And I think as a community leader, I'm really needing to look outside of the box and expose myself to more arenas, like this, and find out, what's out there. And then look at other nonprofit agencies that have missions that match the mission that the community has. As a senior, I want to continue to live in my home and have my independence. I don't want to ride a scooter to go to the market and try to carry my groceries on a bike. I want to get in my car and go where it is I want to go. Unfortunately, I don't have a grocery store in my immediate neighborhood, so I do have to go in my car and go to different places. No, I'm not going to go online and have my groceries delivered. I like to touch my stuff. So because our world is made up of different people of different ages, we need to look at things more holistically. We have a large population of seniors, and their needs also need to be met. And so I think for me, when I get on the state, since we're the state representative here, I think that there has been some injustice done in communities where they have been gentrified, they have been blocked from getting information and resources. And the state needs to do a better job, our elected state members need to do a better job, and doing
Acquisition of properties and then RFPs for disposition, like what happens with those properties before the developers even get involved. So they're part of acquisition disposition on the front end, not after the development happens. And doing that is a massive amount of capacity funding for those groups to have community charrettes and whatever, and actually develop a full process. This is what a land bank does. Not to talk about that too much, but there's a whole push about a land bank, and this is the idea, and a lot of cities are doing it, where they really center community voice. And the second thing is home repair. I think there's massive deferred maintenance. We know this, but just aging housing stock. You mentioned the HUBs program, chronically underfunded. We need a Marshall Plan of aid to people for their properties and deferred maintenance. It's just been too long.
All right, Sharon.
Well, I'm gonna just say, all y'all are right, so let me just do something different. I'm gonna go to, professionally, I'm an 88 504 manager, and I was the 88 coordinator in the city. And one of the things that happened was, as you change administrations, the disability section gets smaller and smaller, and just gets placed somewhere. It used to be part of the mayor's office. So we never think about anybody that has a physical or a mental health disability when we think about housing. And so what came out of that is I go and find the people that are the loudest voices that complain about the city to be on the Disabilities Commission. And what came out of that, everybody came together, and then all of a sudden, there was a lawsuit against the city of Baltimore for sidewalks. And I've sat on those committees, development committees, that you're supposed to talk about when they're doing new projects and things like that. And a lot of times there is an obligation for a developer to fix the sidewalks. But did you know 2%, at the time of that lawsuit, 2% of the sidewalks in Baltimore City were ADA compliant? You know, so think about if you have a mobility disability or you're sitting on a scooter. I wouldn't want to be on a scooter because I might hurt myself. So we need to, when we do community development, we have to also look at the accessibility, walkability, the green space where people can walk. Because when I was growing up, we'd go outside and play outside. You know, not be scared to get run over by a car. So I just think that we need to go back to the basics and make sure everybody has an opportunity to go to the store without having to use a car. Maybe we wouldn't be so scared about having to develop without parking if we weren't so reliant on it and we had accessibility to get places that we need to go. But so I'm gonna end there.
Okay. That's actually kind of funny because I never actually thought about that, because a lot of times when you see people on scooters and they're riding in the street, I didn't know that there was only 2% of sidewalks that were ADA compliant. Maybe that's why. This is why these good discussions. All right, so next and last question. What policy change will have the biggest impact on the entire ecosystem? I know this is a big one. John's face saying, "Oh my Lord, Eddie, what are you doing?" All right, so let it half make. Give it to us real, John. Come on. You want the mic stand?
No. Well, just because it's near and dear to my heart, I mean, I think the way we're doing tax sale reform, the way we collect property taxes in the city, we've gone through this whole reform process over really.
I'm very concerned about health. I'm in that span of life where I know it's important to stay as healthy as you can. But I live in a world where the environment is not always very healthy. So for me, I think it's most important, and I live in a community that's a hot spot. We have more concrete than we have grass, than we have trees. And I recently got a grant from Johns Hopkins to look at the health in my community, which meant I had to go out and talk to people about it. And one of the things that I found is that people are sad. Some people are very depressed. We have empty nesters. We have young people who aren't sure about their future, uneducated, made some bad choices. We have people concerned about their house and where we're going to live next year and things of that nature. And so this kind of relation can affect your health. You know, one of the larger components of our health in my community is most of the children have asthma. And the reason for the asthma, I found out, was because we have so much concrete in our area, and our young people are little. So they're breathing in that heat when it's a hot day, that's taking it in, and it affects their respiratory system. So I think it's important as we look at our environment that we also make, if I can think out of the box, that we also make it important that we also take care of the environment. I think we need more green space planning in all development that occurs. I live next to a church that has 3 parking lots, and none of it, it's all asphalt. I think some of that space could have some grass, because when it rains real heavy, you can see the sand and the gravel empty into a street that gets flooded because the gravel has taken up the storm drain. And that could be eliminated. You know, if we put some green space, you know, in that parking lot. I also live next to M&T Stadium. There's a whole lot of green space there. And I also live near 395. You know, there's no air pollution barrier there. So and I also have an incinerator in my neighborhood, which, you know, on a really hot day, you can see the pollution in the air. So I think it's important that we look at the environment and that we make people accountable, businesses, even churches, to start thinking about how can I help improve the environment that I am in, because I'm also in a community, you know, as well. As M&T Stadium has been, let's say, and this is just a rough estimate, I'm trying trying to create a picture. Let's say they got $600 million from the state. And let's say that $600 million is meant to do some improvement to the stadium.